Though it be cold as balls in the Midwest right now, my guest today is bringing the hot heat to the con and festival scene with his new film, Final Summer. He is John Isberg, and this is Slasher Sports.
And I'm here to kill you.
I am Dracula.
Say that I have shed innocent blood. What's blood for, if not for shedding?
6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
John
Nice.
Isberg,
How you
welcome.
doing? I think that was cool, man. I like the tour of through the history of horror there. It was fun.
You know, man, I got to give all the props to Jack Fiddler. He makes a good intro theme, and I actually used to use a guy named Carl Casey from White Bat Audio, an equally badass theme.
Yeah.
But I like to kind of cut the quotes in there. I used to have one that was a little bit longer, and I kind of had to trim it down because it almost felt like it was copyright infringement. So I just took a couple of things here and there, some things that just stay in my mind, and I left it at that. But before we went live here, we were talking about the Academy Awards and Michelle Yeoh and Short Round and how we basically grew up with with Shorty and the Temple of Doom and Goonies, and now he took this long hiatus and now he's winning Academy Awards. How bonkers is that?
It was incredible. I mean, I think that his story is really cool because, as a child actor, and then of course, like being like a refugee from another country is pretty wild too. Like when he talked about how he spent a year in a camp over there, and it's pretty incredible. And then to think about, like I always say, like if you're going into film, make sure you kind of find a few areas that you can be useful at on a set, and so, it's interesting to kind of listen to his story going from like a child actor into kind of not really getting enough roles anymore, and then kind of switching gears and going into stunt coordinator and stuff, and like a lot of like behind the scenes, like kind of below the line stuff. So that was really cool to hear how he had managed to stay in film for a long time, and then this comeback now. And then I don't know if you saw the photo of like the video where he runs up on the stage and he greets Harrison Ford, and I'm just like,
seeing his acceptance speeches and how emotional he gets. Like I'm not an emotional guy, man.
Yeah.
But it's hard to fight back. It's like the throat might have gotten a little bit dry.
Yeah.
Once or twice.
Yeah.
Just watching, and it's like you want good things to happen to good people, and you just know that he is a really good guy, and he's worked really hard, and he's faced some struggles that are probably largely unspoken.
Yeah.
And now he's just thriving. I'm talking Academy, the elite of what is to be expected from your hard work, or what used to basically have some kind of merit. I want to give him the merit, but then again, I want to look at films like, I don't know, La La Land and be like, well, it's just the Academy,
right?
They do that because until they start taking horror seriously, I don't watch. I watched in some number of years.
Oh yeah, because I think what was it, like 3 days ago? It was like some kind of like a 40th anniversary of The Howling, and then going back to like all of the Academy Award nominated work on that. I think right with like, what was that, Rick Baker? I think who did all of the like the werewolf stuff for that one. And
Rick Baker.
And then you have American Werewolf in London, which I think was also Rick Baker. And then I feel like horror gets like the technical stuff, but then I think it's just like just so much creativity to it, you know, which is fascinating.
Well, where do you stand on maybe Mia Goth's performance in Pearl?
Oh, I thought it was great. You know, I thought that, you know, because then there was the articles that talked about like, you know, her kind of comments on Academy Awards, and I don't know. I think it's, I think I totally get where she's coming from, and then I also think that there's something fun about, you know, not being completely accepted by the mainstream.
See, that's where I'm kind of, you know, in and out. Like, do I want horror to become, you know, more taken seriously? Absolutely, I do. But do I like the fact that, you know, it's still the outcast of filmmaking? Yes, I also do. And like, you can't really have it both ways, but here I am trying to have it both ways.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So just thinking about it, you know, my favorite all-time rock and roll band is AC/DC.
Mhm.
I don't think they've ever won a Grammy. And
Yeah.
you know, they have the second highest selling rock album, I think, or maybe album altogether. I can't remember exactly what the numbers are nor the category, but AC/DC's Back in Black at one time was only into Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Right. Yeah.
Second, and no Grammys. I mean,
Right.
take hard rock, heavy metal seriously as, you know, a musical form. You have to think album sales, and you know, I guess talent translated into numbers has to equal album sales, right?
Right.
And but then again, at the same time, you know, Beyonce sells a lot of albums too. So
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting because I always go back to like, you know, horror is kind of fun because it's such a transgressive thing sometimes. And then when I grew up in the 80s, you know, I feel like, you know, you had like examples like Silent Night, Deadly Night, which had this massive uproar from like all the moms, you know. And I remember, and then I specifically remember like growing up in Chicago, I used to watch, I grew up kind of watching Siskel and Ebert. They were two film critics, and they had a show called At the Movies. And if you saw the new, the 80s horror doc, they show this scene where Siskel's like raging against all of these slasher movies, and literally like posting where the producers live, and you should write them and publicly shame like you know, the actor who played like Mrs. Voorhees in the first one. It's like, this is just ridiculous, you know. And so I don't know. It's interesting though, because I also live in Champaign, and like we're really known for Roger Ebert, who I actually really like him a lot as a film critic. One of my favorite moments was, I remember I was really big into comic books, and I read the Sin City graphic novel by Frank Miller. And so when the movie came out, I'm like, oh, dude, I got to go see this. And so I went. It was great, and it was everything that I was hoping it would be. But I also worked at this kind of nice bistro next to the theater as I was like a waiter there. And I remember this table came in, and they're really nice, like in their 50s, kind of like two couples. They're talking about, oh, we're going to go see Sin City. I'm like, are you familiar with? And they're like, oh, Roger Ebert said. I'm like, yeah, but all right. And then they came back later. I can't believe he would recommend this, that. And I just kind of laughed to myself, because I was like, yeah. And that made me have an appreciation for him in terms of like his ability to appreciate film in all forms versus like, you know, like when we talk about Academy Awards, I always feel like it's a specific kind of like a Shakespeare in Love or something, where I'm like, yeah, I put a drill through my head before I watch that again. That's the second time for that. But anyway, I talk a lot right now. So.
No, hey, talk all you want, but first let me shout out Christian Rao from
Let's go.
From Slasher Sports. We are going, sir. This is Slasher Sports Cinema. I am here with John Isberg.
Hey.
Director, screenwriter, producer. I don't know. You probably wore a lot of hats on this one.
Editor, cinematographer, producer.
Yeah. Caterer, maybe. Blessed boy. I don't know. If there's a hat to be worn, you probably wore it on this one. But you know, back in the 80s, Siskel and Ebert were, you know, if the movie trailer didn't say Siskel and Ebert gives this one
two
thumbs up,
totally.
Yeah, there's no sense in going to see it.
There's just
no sense.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. No, because I I've been like doing a lot of because with Roger Ebert, and then there's the Ebert Film Festival in town, and so every year a lot of these kind of famous kind of film people will come to town, and like critics and stuff, and we shoot all the B-roll, and it's pretty fun. Maybe I shouldn't talk about this, I don't know. But it's interesting to kind of get a behind the scenes peek at things, because I think the one thing that's interesting about film criticism, I think this goes back to horror, especially with like indie horror, is it's kind of I always, like, I've been saying this for a while now, but like I feel like a completed film is a miracle, and a completed no budget horror film is also a miracle of miracles. And so it's like when you get through this long like slog, like, in Shawshank Redemption, when he's talking about like Andy Dufresne, who crawled through 500 miles of his own filth to get out on the other side, and he's like, scrubbing himself with the soap. I feel like that's how it feels to get to the end of a film. And the funniest thing is the component that is like film criticism, because you'll be like, it's done, and then someone like is like tugging on your shirt or tapping you on the shoulder. You like look over, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I think the third act could have used this, and you're like, who the hell are you? And it's like some film critic.
And even worse, it's not some film critic, it's like some schmuck like me.
Oh yeah.
Who like who watched, I don't know, The Godfather a couple of times and fancied himself, a dialogue expert, or binges Tarantino on the weekends and thinks that he's all of a sudden a film historian.
Some of it's interesting because I watched my friend Luke had a movie called Revealer that came out on Shudder, and watching
loved Revealer.
Oh yeah, it was really fun.
Loved Revealer.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was fun. We shot that. It was kind of one of the first films in Illinois that we shot after the pandemic, but I just remember some of the reviews were really cool, and then some were like, there was this one from this guy in Chicago that was like so vitriolic, I almost wanted to like frame it. It's like, this guy cared enough to hate it that much with such artistry, to his writing. I'm like, man, I hope I inspire somebody to, feel that aggressively about something I do someday. I mean, it's just kind of funny. Like, I feel like it's hard to, I mean, it's kind of one of those things again where you know everything that's flawed about your own film, to the point where like it's like we got invited to like go to Peoria to screen it at this massive theater. And they're like, oh, it's this 5-story screen. I'm like, great, I can see every mistake I made 5 stories tall
in 8K. Yeah,
yeah, right.
That's the worst part of it. But like, let me just say something about Revealer. I went in with very low expectations.
Yeah.
I'm a subscriber of Shudder, and like a lot of the things that I've watched, I'm like, okay, maybe it wasn't for me. Yeah. And then I looked and I was like, okay, Revealer, there's a lot of the bisexual lighting and the the dialogue was like, okay, wait a minute, maybe they're working with something here. Yeah. And I said, okay, this is some kind of a like artsy situation that I'm probably not going to be into. Wrong. I love the dialogue. I love the I guess the camera work.
Yeah,
the actresses were fantastic. Doggone Bishop Stevens looking like a Greek god.
Yeah. Oh, with this Jerry curl. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, with oh man, listen, I got a lot of time for Bishop Stevens, and I was pleasantly surprised to see him in this film because I did no homework going into Final Summer.
Oh no.
I should say that you were gracious enough to let me screen the film, and I'm very appreciative of that because it was time well spent. Okay. But I have to ask. I mean, you said you live in Champaign.
Yeah.
Your Facebook profile says you're originally from Aurora.
Oh yeah, I grew up in Aurora, Illinois.
Like I really thought, John, I really thought that Aurora was a fictitious city made only for Wayne's World.
Right. Yeah.
So that was like Makita's really a place there?
No. They probably filmed like, all right, so like I think the only thing they got was like maybe like a shot of a White Castle, because there was a White Castle on Lake Street in Aurora. But then like when they showed the car statue, that was like in the suburbs, I think on 38 or something as you're going to the city. It's like Berwyn area. So they just had like a second unit dudes like going around shooting stuff because, I
feel deceived.
Yeah. Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
I
there's
don't
no
know if it was Wayne's World or you that's deceiving me, but like I feel like a dream's just been crushed. Like it's one of those things where, as a baseball fan, I want to go to to Cooperstown
all
and
right,
and
right.
and, and
Totally.
see, and maybe even Kansas City to see the Negro Leagues Hall of Fame.
Right. Yeah.
As a football fan, I want to go to Canton, check out the Hall of Fame there. Well, I mean, as a '90s kid, maybe I wanted to go to Aurora and see Nikita's and see where
Right.
Wayne's basement. Only it's
That's
not
right.
Wayne's
Yeah.
basement.
What was the thing? The sugar pucks. They're excellent or something. That yeah, Makita's. I recommend the
I
sugar
mean, I wanted
pucks.
to go see the Shitty Beatles play at some loft party. You know,
Yeah, Roar was never that cool, man. It was kind of like, and then the second one they had like comrades or something. I'm like, what is this? And then like Gasworks with like the sign and everything.
yeah.
Even
But
with drag. Yeah.
Wayne's World was full of like scenes that like maybe they had nothing to do with the main storyline, but they
Yeah.
stick out to me more than anything else.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know, I guess in part 2 where they roll up on the actor, ask where's Gordon Street.
Oh,
Gordon Street.
Charlton Heston comes out. He's like,
Yeah, like they have to replace the actor. It's like, and then Wayne
he's
is
like
like,
a tear.
thank you.
Yeah.
And then Ed O'Neill. Like, first of all,
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm as big an Ed O'Neill fan as there is in the world, and for like multiple reasons. The guy's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, and like just a badass guy. And
Yeah.
he's like one of those actors where like once he passes on, it's gonna be a big hole in
Right.
my I guess my teen years. I wouldn't say my childhood,
I
but his
literally.
lines are ridiculous, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I literally had a dream about Ed O'Neill. I think this
We
morning.
all do.
Yeah, it was weird. I woke
Yeah.
up. I'm like, all right, who's it? And I always love to do that game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. And I
I
don't
love that. Yeah,
I don't.
that's the perfect road trip game.
Oh, totally. We used to do that when I was in bands a lot. As we, like just throw a name out, and then you'd be like driving all day. But I was obsessive about it. So someone would just tell me the name, and I would be sitting there for like hours trying to think of whatever. But no, Aurora was kind of where I grew up. It's funny.
Well, give me Ed O'Neill to Kevin Bacon.
Ed
Can we
O'Neill.
do it off the top of our head?
Jeez. All right, let me see here. Yeah.
Ed O'Neill was with Rick Moranis in Little Giants.
Oh, really?
Rick Moranis was
that's
John
easy.
Candy.
Actually, okay, that's real simple. So Ed O'Neill was in Little Giants with Rick Moranis, who's in Ghostbusters with Bill Murray, who was in that one. Shoot, it's literally with Kevin Bacon. What's that?
See, I'm trying to draw something back to Footloose.
No. It's Sweet. Was it Something Things or something? It's with Nev Campbell and
Wild Things.
Wild Things. Yeah.
See, I knew you could do it.
All right.
As like together, we were unstoppable.
I know, right? Yeah.
Unstoppable.
Anyway,
So Aurora, Illinois, man, like you came up, and at what point in life did you say, I want to do something with film. I want to do something with acting. I want to do something with just filmmaking in general.
it was funny. Like when I was a kid, I went to elementary school in Aurora, and they were shooting this film in Aurora called Let's Get Harry, which is kind of a terrible movie, but it was with Glenn Fry, Gary Busey, the guy from who plays Biff in Back to the Future was in it too. And they were shooting like outside of my friend's street, and my friend was telling me, oh, there's this movie. And so I think that was really intriguing. And then just kind of the way my family always treated movies. Like we had a Laserdisc player, and we'd make Kool-Aid and popcorn, and we'd always be watching movies. And and then we'd go to there was a place called the Paramount Art Center in Aurora, which is the Paramount Theater, which is just a brilliant, completely beautiful movie palace. And if you've ever seen that movie Public Enemies with Johnny Depp and Christian Bale, there's a scene where they go to this theater, and then they turn on the lights, and they're like, look left and look right. And that's in the Paramount Theater. And I think it was just from an early age, like the movies had a really kind of magical sense to them, like, I don't know. And then with horror, it was funny because my parents were kind of conservative, and, I wasn't allowed to like dress up like a monster for Halloween and stuff. Part of our family's from Joliet. Oh yeah. That's where my cousins and stuff are from. My dad grew up in Joliet too, and used to go through.
This is my sister, by the way, chiming in. We don't have any family in Joliet. Maybe we do. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there was a theater in Joliet. I remember my dad talking about. We actually shot a movie called Slice in Joliet a couple years ago. It's like a A24, Chance the Rapper. Bishop's in that too, actually, and like Joe Keery pre Stranger Things. But anyway, like I think I just love film, and then finally I moved to like a small town called Elburn, where literally nothing ever happened. And then I moved away. And then like 2 years ago, like Jordan Peele's Lovecraft County is shot in that town, and Paper Girls from Amazon shot there. I'm like, what the, anyway. So, but my friend, I had two friends, and one had like a video camera and two VCRs. And the other
Sure.
one had a ton of comic books, and then got me interested in like every horror movie. And so we just started making movies all the time, like on the weekends and stuff, with like a video camera. And they were always kind of cheesy, and then finally, like when I graduated high school, I'm like, I went to SIU, Southern Illinois University, for film, but I dropped out after like a semester. But I think it was just always there. And then when I was in bands, most of my 20s, we started doing music videos, and we shot a music video in LA. And I remember just being really in awe of the cinematographer, and the director was okay, but I liked the cinematographer. I think he was just the coolest guy I ever met. And shooting, I think they were shooting like Super 16 or something but it was just a really cool experience, and it made me want to read more. And then finally a movie came to town in 2014. I was teaching at the time. I had my summer off, and so it just kind of was perfect to just transition into the set. I knew nothing about film, but like I interned in the grip department, and it just completely changed my life. After that, I was like hooked. Like I remember the final day of our it's this thing in film shoots called Fraturdays. It's kind of like the worst day ever, but it's basically, it starts on a Friday and it ends on a Saturday, like much later in the day. Where you're just shooting everything because it's the last day and you're never sure if you're going to get back. And I remember we wrapped at like 6 a.m. I think we were shooting fireworks off and had some champagne that came out. And it was just, I just loved it. It was so much fun. So anyway.
I've got a good friend up in the Chicago area, as a matter of fact, Ben Schatzel. You may know Ben, another filmmaker. He's been involved in a number of the projects that I've, had the privilege to, I guess, review, cover on this podcast, starting back with Curse of the Were-Deer. That's where I met him, and Curse of the Were-Deer is coming out pretty soon.
Nice.
But listen, Bloody Disgusting called your film Final Summer a callback slasher to the Friday the 13th franchise. So in your own words, like, is that kind of what you're aiming for?
I would say definitely an homage to the 80s slashers, definitely summer camp slashers, because I think that kind of like my idea for the film was, one, I wanted to, I've been wanting to make a film for a while now, and I think horror is such a great genre because as an emerging filmmaker, you don't really need a lot of money and stuff. And so it was kind of one of those things where you're whittling down the idea. And then finally I thought, well, slasher would be great because I love slasher films. I grew up on them. And I think summer camp really came about because of the location, because I was looking around, I'm like, well, let's see what kind of locations are around. And then I felt like, oh, I saw this Boy Scout camp. I'm like, okay, let's make it a summer camp slasher film, because in the other thing that kind of, I think people forget sometimes is we were still pretty heavily into COVID when we were shooting. We were originally going to shoot the summer of 2020, but that was just out because that was like the thick of it. And I wasn't ready anyway, but we shot 2021, and it's kind of a perfect bubble, because we're basically this isolated camp miles from nowhere, surrounded by nothing except like, a forest, and then surrounded by an ocean of cornfield, basically. So it was a perfect place to go to shoot a film without necessarily worrying about, COVID or anything like that. Because if anyone got sick, that would have been it. So it's kind of a bunch of things that led to, Friday the 13th kind of stuff.
Well, the recurring theme with a lot of the guests who I speak to on the podcast, they all have horror stories of their own, I guess, filming during COVID. And you you had the luxury, I guess you could call it a luxury, of kind of being secluded, which is what they wanted you to be during the height of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, I'm with you, man. The summer camp slasher, almost, when I think summer camp slashers, and like, I'm as big a fan of the summer camp slasher or just summertime slashers, it doesn't have to be in camp, as you're gonna find. Like, I cut my teeth on Friday the 13th Part 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jenny and Paul are like the first couple of horror for me. Jenny was, my first final girl. Generally when I think of those summer slashers, like the 80s decade comes to mind.
Yeah.
The calf high socks and the teased hair, the synth music. But your film actually jumps forward a little bit and puts us into a new decade. It's the early 90s. Big transitional period for a lot of the people. You were only born a couple of years before me. Okay, well, maybe more than a couple, but very close. But this film, I mean, it's the early 90s, final day of summer camp at Camp Silver Lake. Is there any, is that a real place?
No.
So are we giving the homage to Camp Crystal Lake?
It's actually
accidental.
Well, then, I mean, you can't help but avoid like a lake in there, but like, it's kind of like a really kind of loose homage to Nick Castle, because Nick Castle, he played the Shape, Michael Myers, but then he also directed one of my favorite films when I was a kid called The Last Starfighter. And in The Last Starfighter, they go to Silver Lake. So I thought, that'd be kind of like a really random, no one's going to get an Easter egg, but kind
very nice though.
Yeah,
I like the obscurity.
Oh, thanks. So that's why I tried to
obscurity there.
Make it one word. But I understand why people are still like, it's a ripoff of Crystal Lake. I'm like,
hang on. Listen, I'm all about the homage. Okay, when it comes to horror and the summer slashers, man, I could stand for more homages. Is that the right plural?
Oh yeah. Or homage.
Homages.
Homage.
Yeah. Well, listen, the kids almost made it out. Isberg. All right, they almost made it out, but why the summer of 91? Why are we kicking it into the 90s? We're not quite yet listening to Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
Yeah,
MTV's it's doing its thing, but Beavis and Butthead isn't there, so it's really not worth watching yet.
Yeah.
So why 91?
I think it was I think because one, I felt like I'd seen enough 80s kind of horror films and stuff set in the 80s, and so I wanted to kind of move it. Plus, like I was 15 when 91 hit, and so I just remember like the culture shift was really interesting, because on TV you had like 90210, and even on 90210 is interesting because I remember they have a Color Me Bad on as a musical guest, but then as it ended they'd have like the Flaming Lips, you know what I mean? It was kind of wild, and so it was this interesting transition from 80s. Like New Jack City and, Boyz II Men and, all these kind of, Velvet DeVoe. And then you're moving into like from hair metal, even like all the power ballads and all that stuff, into kind of the beginnings of alternative and like college radio, like there was still like the Replacements and REM and stuff going on. But I feel like 91 was such a cultural shift because you had in 1 year, you had Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, Metallica's Black Album, Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Nirvana's Nevermind record. So I mean, it's kind of, somebody was like, yeah, but that didn't come out to like after that. I'm like, yes, who cares? Like,
yeah, okay, yeah, sure, but at the same time, the vibe is there.
Oh yeah.
Like the cultural shift, like you said, is, I mean, it's in full effect.
And I think
I'm drawing a blank on my years, but I remembered specifically there was a TV show that I used as not a TV show, but a satellite TV channel that I used as my, I guess, antithesis of MTV. Yeah. And it was called The Box. Please tell me you remember The Box.
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, Isberg. Let hang on. let me get you up to speed on what The Box was. So keep in mind, I've got satellite TV. I don't have cable TV. Okay. Like we didn't have a lot of income anyway. So like we were just in hog heaven just having that gigantic satellite dish in the backyard.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you guys had the dish.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. You would put it on a different like branch of channels, and you look out your window and see it like turning towards Mars or wherever the hell it was looking. Yeah, it was rough, man.
Their house or something,
Pretty much. And it probably, if I'm, I'm just guessing here, spitballing, but like that thing was so big, it probably brought the land value down to the home, just it being there. But regardless, the box was a TV station where it was nonstop music videos, but there was a scrolling hotline at the bottom of the screen where you could basically call in, pay whatever amount of chump change there was to pay to request a music video. Whether they actually honored the request, who knows? Because like they could always just fall back on it. Well, I mean, we got so many requests and we're going to get to it eventually.
Right.
But that was when I stopped listening to, I didn't stop listening, but I supplemented my listens of AC/DC, Van Halen, ZZ Top, all the rock and roll bands that I liked. And I started filling it in with like Danzig, Gary Hoey, and Frank Black from the Pixies.
Oh yeah. I
mean, like different things, that Iny Kamoze's Here Comes the Hot Stepper was a really big one. I don't know what year this is, but man, it was 90s full effect.
Well, I think it's interesting because like you look at the movies, like a lot of the movies of the late 80s, like I feel like even from like 87 to 91, they were definitely heading that direction, like getting a little bit smarter, getting a little bit away from like your typical, like, I don't know. I was watching like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies last couple of nights and seeing the kind of like from part 3 to part 4 and just the progression. And then even like going to movies like, what is it? Return to Horror High, which is a really interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. That one's really cool.
What about Heart of Seeing Return to Horror High? Of course I've seen Return to Horror High.
Yeah, with like George Clooney, but like and it has this fun like meta, like a film within a film where there's like that production that they're shooting, and it's kind of cool.
It was a Scream before Scream.
Oh yeah, oh totally, or like Popcorn too. And so you can see how even in the horror genre at that time, like the slasher, they were getting more meta and more kind of intelligent in a way. And so, but I think, and then I always go back to like Pump Up the Volume with like Christian Slater and movies like that, and then you mentioned the Pixies, and they had that UK, the surf version of Wave of Mutilation in the song where it's like kind of chilled out, like like Wave of Mutilation. It's so good. Anyway.
No, it was a great time, man. It was, first of all, like 91. It was a good year. Like my favorite NFL team won the Super Bowl. Like, of course, never to sniff the promised land ever again after that. But like 3 of my favorite childhood films were kind of new, or at least coming up. Like the new to me, Tim Burton's Batman was like 89. So, but I didn't get around to seeing it until like 90, 91.
Yeah.
There's Dick Tracy. I'm pretty sure that's when Hulk Hogan's No Holds Barred came out, which was a horror in its own right.
Yeah.
But like, I like these throwback slashers though, John. Like I feel like illustrating the time frame can kind of put me back to that time when I guess I was like a more vulnerable viewer. Like when in my mind, that blade wielding killer was outside my window or in my closet.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where I was mentally at that time. So do you have like any kind of favorite outside of Friday the 13th, maybe summer slashers that you might have unconsciously drawn from for this project?
It's funny, like, cause I watched Prom Night not that long ago, and I was kind of blown away at there were so many similarities with Prom Night with our film that I never even like thought about. And so I think it's just, sometimes I feel like these films like have a very subconscious way of getting into your head a bit, like when I saw, even like the physicality of the killer in Prom Night, I was like, whoa. And there's a couple of scenes where I'm like, wow, that's pretty, and I was never thinking of it, but I watched I think I watched like 200 slasher movies as I was writing it and preparing, because I love Easter eggs. I wanted to have those things, but I think the big ones that stuck out to me was like The Burning I enjoyed that one for the editing of it was really good. And
the Burning with George Costanza.
That's right.
All right. Just want to throw
Although I always find it funny because like that the most famous scene in the film is like literally the most implausible, which is like the guy's hiding in that canoe, like paddling over, and then he like stands up in a canoe. Like, how is that? Like he should have just ate it.
Don't
there.
ask questions.
I don't.
Don't ask questions.
This is where your mind goes. So sometimes when I see these comments about like even like my movie, like, oh, I don't understand what did it. I'm like, yeah, I kind of be the same way. So
no, you see, I don't buy any of that because I don't give any credence to it because you take a listen. Who's more revered in the horror genre than John Carpenter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Halloween, it's become like a recurring kill for him to knife somebody to the wall, right? But you see the length of that blade, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And when he sticks it in somebody's chest, and it's only like that far into the into the body,
right?
And they're sticking them to the wall. Like, come on, man! I know the shape of that knife, and it's not even going all the way through the person.
Right? Yeah,
so if you can handle that, you can handle a man standing up in a canoe. You can handle whatever it is that you don't like about Final Summer.
Right? Yeah.
I think you can handle any of it. If Carpenter can F up, we can all F up.
No, that's true. I think that's the thing that I kind of went back to even with our film was that like if the audience is paying attention to something that is like wrong with the scene, then the story's not working and you have bigger problems, I think, and so sometimes it's like, there might be some continuity. Like I was dealing with the QC for our deliverables today and there was like a continuity error that none of us had ever caught where like a flashlight head went from this hand to this hand in the same dialogue scene. And I just never caught it. But I'm just like, it's not going to make or break the end of the world. You know what I mean? Like, versus.
Listen, if I must keep doing this with you, Isberg, if I must keep doing this, just a notch below Halloween has got to be Friday the 13th. Right. Okay. Jason Voorhees in the same day went from being like 5'10" to 6'4"
with long
in the
hair.
same day. Long hair to like completely bald. Yeah. And I know he didn't hit up Floyd's barbershop.
Right. Yeah.
No, sir. Yeah. I'm not going to stand for any of your continuity nonsense. A man can change hands at any moment.
Yeah.
Listen,
and a machete.
Water bottle stuck in there. Here I am. Your movie was perfect.
Yeah.
Isberg. All right. I don't want to hear any more about it. I do want to hear a little bit more about it.
Sure.
We're talking about 80s icons, 80s movies.
Yeah.
Well, you did get an iconic figure from 80s slashers for Final Summer. So tell the public who you got. Talk me through the process of getting them involved.
Yeah, Tom Matthews is awesome. I was a complete surprise and a complete like Hail Mary kind of toss to get him involved. Because originally I reached out to Kane Hodder and he was interested, but he was way too outside of our budget level. So I was like, okay, because I actually based Warren Copper's character on Kane Hodder. I don't know if you've seen the documentary about Kane Hodder. It's really good and really powerful. And he talks a lot about his kind of PTSD from that fire that happened when he was a stuntman. And so I was just really intrigued by him because of, this guy who plays Jason, who's known for, he's always like killing everybody. Would have trauma and have PTSD because I also have it too. So I thought that was interesting, but he unfortunately couldn't do it. And then we finally got Neil Affleck, who was the villain from the original My Bloody Valentine. And he was also an editor and director, animator on The Simpsons show. So he did like Treehouse of Horror and stuff, but he was really cool. But unfortunately, since he was in Toronto, then we had the visa situation. And then with COVID, he just ended up not being able to do it. And finally just has a complete, like, all right, let's just throw it out there and see what happens. I was like, well, Tom Matthews is pretty cool and maybe he'd do it. And so I reached out to his agent and we started to talk a bit more. And I kind of told him what the film was about. And then I had shot a sizzle reel the previous summer, kind of like a trailer for the film. So we kind of shot this because I kind of wanted to, again, you say slasher, there's like 2,000 slasher movies. And so I kind of wanted to show them what I was thinking of. I wanted something that was like kind of darker and more mysterious and like a cool vibe to it with like kind of some cool cinematography. And so I showed him that and he's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, what? so it was kind of incredible. And then he came out, and I talked to him on Zoom the first time, and he was really cool. And we ended up having like some interesting connections in our own personal stories as well. And no, he was just I just kind of like messaged with him today actually, and it's just cool. He sent me like a photo of himself at one of the horror cons with him and like a kid, like a little kid with like a Jason mask on. And I saw he had like Final Summer poster next to his other stuff. And it just meant a lot to me, because it's so, you just never think you're going to do this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like when you're making your first film, you don't think anyone's going to care. You don't think anybody's going to show up at all. And so it's kind of incredible,
It is incredible, because this is a guy that we watched in, a couple of different films, that were major horror, major horror influences from the 80s. I mean, of course, he was the final Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th Part 6. He was the Tommy Jarvis used in the Friday the 13th video game.
Right.
I'd say known for being Tommy as Corey Feldman is.
Yeah.
Where somewhere along the way, John Shepard got forgotten, even though he's, judo throwing dudes through tables.
Right.
In Part 5. By far the more physical Tommy.
Oh, completely.
The snapped, ain't putting up with anybody's shit Tommy.
Right.
but Tom Matthews, I mean, he had so much of what we love, and now, I mean, you're basically rubbing elbows with him, and that's got to be, I don't want to call it a stroke to the ego, because it almost sounds arrogant, but man, it's got to hit you, pretty deep. It's like, you know what, maybe I am doing something here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, because I just can't. I don't know. I work with the Smashing Pumpkins, and I've been on sets with like some pretty big names and stuff like that, and so I just feel like you just kind of get to the point where you just know that they're normal people,
Sure.
And like, I mean, like, Eberfest, when your Guillermo del Toro came, I'm like standing next to him filming B-roll of him signing email or like autographs and stuff. And I'm like, you're Guillermo del Toro.
And I'm just supposed to pretend that you're not right here.
But it's like, I just got a job to do, and that's what I'm going to do. And it's even like with working with the Pumpkins, and that's how, like, Jeff Schroeder, who did the final song for the end credit song for our movie, I was just like, man, I got like the tattoo of the band on my arm, and like I know every song and how to play it on guitar, and like a band that probably meant more to me than anything. And I got to
why the hell am I wearing long sleeves?
Right. Yeah. But it was just kind of like one of those things where it's always, I think the thing I like about those situations is like when you have a job to do and you can stay focused on that. Like when Tom came, it's like, I got a job to do. So I got to direct, I got to operate, I got to get the crew going, so I think, yeah, it's just exciting to work with them, and yeah, like you said, like they must see something in the project. And I think that's the thing that I felt was as hard as, like, today was a tough day because I was dealing with like deliverable stuff, and I got all this stuff that came back with like, like rejected. I'm like, okay. It helps to remember those moments and those times, because it's really hard to make a film, and I'm to talk to anybody who's listening right now who's thinking about making a movie. Yeah, it's really tough. It's probably the hardest thing I've done ever. I've been through boot camp in the Army. I've went through grad school. I taught middle school students with emotional disabilities. This is easily the hardest thing I've ever done.
A series of miracles, and John, you're one of them, man.
Oh, thanks.
You're one of them.
Yeah. Well, we're trying.
Listen, if the best thing I could ever say is, like, I mean, who am I to give any advice to you? But like, if you act like you don't belong, so will they.
Yeah.
And like, you're right there because you deserve to be right there.
Well, we're trying. We're getting there. Yeah.
We are getting there slowly but surely, like the duck pulling the truck, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I
was going to say, like, some of the people that have inspired me this year is, seeing like Damien Leone's Terrifier 2. And it's like, I went to AFM, American Film Market, in November to talk to distributors. And it was funny because I would meet other distributors and they're all looking for like the next Terrifier 2. And I was like, you're looking for an anomaly. You're looking for a dude who's been working on one film idea for 16 years and polishing it and honing it. And I think, and that to me is really, I was kind of thinking about that today wearing the Evil Dead shirt, because it even went back to like Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead, Whereas it's like it's the idea, you know, and it wasn't made. It was still rough, but basically rough because of limitations of budget and all that kind of stuff. And then you're growing as a filmmaker. I mean, same with like how All Hallows Eve led to Terrifier and then led to Terrifier 2, which is had a huge, massive like indie horror splash. So I think like those films are very inspiring to me because I feel like I can see where, like, for example, like, you know, like I think I was telling you, I had to turn down like 50 grand like 4 days before we went to shoot because these guys were basically trying to rip off our film. You know, they were just trying to steal everything. And so I was like, yeah, I can't take your money.
So isn't it wild how that works though? It's like when you're playing poker and you know you've got like a really strong hand. You know, you've got, I don't know, you got a flush, and like you think there's no way that I'm gonna be able to I'm gonna lose this hand. But you know, they're also playing their cards, and they know they've got the royal flush.
Yeah,
and like what kind of discipline do you have to muck your cards, right? And to turn down 50 grand. It's just really difficult. And it takes resolve and it takes wherewithal. And man, I think you did well for yourself.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was tough. We had an emergency meeting because they had kind of come on a month ahead of time, and they were like, oh, you know, welcome to the family. And I think every filmmaker could kind of attest to this. It's like, you know, you're hoping someone's going to come along and believe in your film as much as you do. And then all of a sudden someone does. And then they're also bringing like the cavalry. Like there's this really great South by Southwest speech from Mark Duplass where the cavalry's not coming. And like you and your friends are the cavalry. And that's 100% true. and 1,000 times true on our film, you know, because like the cavalry was coming and they're bringing money and I can't believe this is great. And then 4 days before they sent all the legal paperwork. And I'm like, what is this? This is a bill of sale to transfer everything to you guys. I'm like, no.
I don't know how they get away with it. Like how do they even justify, like, what is their pitch like as to what benefits you?
Oh,
like,
they pitched me on the fact that they're like, well, you know, like, what if you run off with our money? I'm like, you're literally giving me money to make my dream happen. Why would I ever do that? Plus, like, I've been doing this nonprofit workshop for like 4 years, kind of just like training like high school and college students how to work on a set. And then also like we would go make our own movies, and we would do so much with like horror lighting and stuff like that. And we would take things like scenes, like a line of screen direction from a script. Like I remember one was like a woman hears a strange noise and goes downstairs to investigate, which is like every horror film, right?
Sure.
But the thing I wanted to show people was it's like, that is such an opportunity. Like that line of screen direction in a script is an opportunity to really go all in on like just the tension and the motion and all those the pauses and you know, all the things that you see in every horror movie for like the last 50 years or 100 years. And so that's where like I think the excitement of that stuff comes. But we were doing all this stuff, and so finally like I basically trained my crew over 4 years. So when they were gonna like they try to pull that move on us, I'm like, you guys are idiots. We have everything we need to shoot this film. You know, and so we did an emergency meeting. I asked the crew if we could just hang in there. And I said, I'll pay you guys like installments, and it might take a little bit longer, but I'm going to pay everybody. And so we had a 16 grand Kickstarter. We had like 4 like smaller investors, and the rest was out of pocket. And then I just worked the last year and a half, basically. I'm still like, you know, like just paying everybody in installments. And thankfully they agreed to do it, because otherwise I wouldn't even be here without them. So it's
let's put them over a little bit. First of all, I mean, let's talk about the cavalry.
Yeah.
Tell me about your cast. I mean, you got a largely young cast, you know, just kind of getting started on their path to, I guess, horror infamy. So tell me how you settled on them for your film. Who stood out? Who do you want to work with again? Spill it.
That's a loaded. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's interesting because there were some people so it was a mix of actors who had come out of the University of Illinois theater program. And then there are people that were actors in the local Champaign-Urbana community. And then some I found through some casting sites. And then Bishop I'd worked with a bunch of times before, so I knew he was coming. Basically, it's funny because I went to was it the acting program at U of I? One of the instructors there is this guy Aaron Munoz, who taught acting for camera. He's a professor there, but he was also Barb's dad in season 2 of Stranger Things. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I just want to go talk to him because I thought that was kind of neat to hear about his experiences. Sure. And the weirdest thing happened. I went to go to Cranert Center, and there's this like elevator to go to like the main floor. And I get on the elevator to go meet Aaron, and this guy got on, like a worker at the building, like a maintenance guy. But he had like a blue, like mechanics jumpsuit on, and he had a big kitchen knife with him. And this like really happened. And he basically just went back to, there's a coffee shop up there, and I guess he'd taken it or something. I don't know. He was returning it or whatever. I don't really know. All I know is I just started laughing as soon as he got on with me, because I'm gonna go talk to this guy about making a slasher movie, and like Michael Myers gets on with me. It was the most bizarre thing. But anyway, but I talked to Aaron about the different actors, and so he kind of recommended a couple people, because I went back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, how they kind of cast their film with a lot of like UT Austin acting students. And so really then it was just about trying to find like chemistry between the different actors, and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I guess some of my favorites were like, there's an actor, Miles Valentine, who plays Mario in the film, and he's kind of one of my favorites, I think. I don't know if
yeah, you know what? Miles Valentine, I thought I knew him by a different name.
Yeah.
Like maybe I followed him under a different, does he have a different, like, maybe a social media handle?
Maybe, yeah. But I know he's pretty
he's on the run or something. He's running away from the feds or something. He's got a different name. I found him. I actually found him looking for your cast. So I mean, I wanted to know everything there was to know.
Yeah.
About.
No, it was interesting, and I think the great thing about the actors from the University Illinois program was they're all kind of friends, and I felt like that was what I wanted, because in a lot of slasher movies you feel like the cast is always unlikable. They're kind of jerks. You kind of can't wait for them to die, basically. Like, can someone please drop a lawnmower on the dude's head or something, or that guy's despicable, let's just run him over a few times. But I think like I just wanted them to feel like kind of endearing, like friends. And especially like the way that the story is, that it's the end of camp. And so they should feel like they know each other.
Yeah, the ice has been broken already.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They don't want to separate. So they're sad because camp's coming.
Yeah. So I think like, it's interesting. Like I think there's a Farboda Wren who played Ronnie. She was really interesting. I liked her portrayal a lot. And then Charlie Amaker, who played Georgia, is probably one of my favorite characters, because it's, it's like I feel like each person I kind of started to cast the character to the person or whatever. Or sometimes it helped because I would think about certain actors and write to that person. And then Moose was this guy, Rico, who I met through the Chicago casting site. But he had these really funny videos where he was playing every person in his family. He just made me laugh so much, because I kind of wanted to, just have them feel like real people. And then Wyatt Tabor, who plays Peter, is kind of like, I always feel like there's characters in your film that represent the audience. And so I feel like Peter is a character that represents the audience. And also I identify with him because I feel like I was always Peter when I was that age, like always pining after that girl, completely clueless. My ADD would fall out of my mouth. I'd say the stupidest things, So like when they're walking through the woods and he's talking about like going to Venice Beach and the sharks and stuff, I'm like, that's exactly what I would probably mangle. And then I think Mario is another character I feel like represents the audience. And then the toughest one I think was probably Lexi. Like I was working with another actor prior to Jenna Cohn coming on. I felt like the chemistry between Peter and Lexi is so crucial. And so I even like Seth Boyer, who plays Kelly in the film, the one they're kind of dragging around through the film. He was originally supposed to play Peter. But I felt like Peter has this awkwardness and vulnerability to him. And Seth, to me, he was just like Johnny Depp from Nightmare on Elm Street, like kind of like too cool. Like, of course the girl's gonna like him. Like, he's not gonna have any trouble, you know. So, and so he was a champ, and he kind of swapped out roles, and no, it was just great to the cast was great, and then of course Luzzo, who played the killer in the film, under the mask.
I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to spoil anything in case there was something.
We kind of went to the whole with My Bloody Valentine, because like Neil Affleck plays Axel in the film, so like when he takes off, there he is, but Peter Cowper is under the mask, like when they're in the mines. And so I took that as some inspiration for our film. And with Luzzo, like they have this really strong dance background, and so I talked with Luzzo a lot about, I don't want this typical boring zombie murder zombie, like Friday the 13th, where he's just lumbering around killing people randomly. I wanted it to feel real to the psychology of what a narcissist, like a narcissistic sociopath, how they would be in that situation.
Yes.
Because I kind of wanted to go to the real, because with my personal history, I am a survivor of someone like that, and so the things I saw, I wanted to be true to my experience. And so that's why we talk a lot about how this character would move, kind of sleek, almost like sexual in a way, very powerful, but always very like kind of prideful, because it's a narcissist. And so they're like, I'm the coolest, most, scary, powerful thing. And, just how, and then always screwing with them, like just finding ways to elevate that person's sense of fear through their actions. Anyway, I ramble on forever about that.
Well, listen, there are a lot of people that are going to get to see this film coming up very soon, here in just about 10 days.
Yeah.
You got HorrorHound coming up on the 24th, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah, on the March 24th and 26th at the
Yeah.
Sharonville Convention Center. That's near all the Reds fans. So I don't really mess with those people. They're the worst of the worst. Yeah. But I'm glad you're going to be up there with them and not me.
Okay.
But all you really need to know is Final Summer's playing, and you can get your tickets at horrorhoundweekend.com. But apart from my esteemed guest, like, listen to this lineup. All right, we've got a crazy lineup. The great Bruce Campbell's gonna, or at least he's scheduled to be there. I should say these people are scheduled because work commitments could drag him out of there. But there's a huge lineup. Bruce Campbell, Giancarlo Esposito, talking about from Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, The Mandalorian. Matt Lillard and Skeet Ulrich are going to be there.
Yes.
If you're a Scream fan, have you seen the new Scream yet?
No, not yet. So.
Neither have I.
I've been thinking.
I've got opinions on that franchise.
I love the first one. It's hard to top that one.
The first one. Yeah. Hey, listen, the first one is all you needed.
Yeah.
And then we did five more. Cholo Maridueña and Peyton List from Cobra Kai are going to be there. Doug Bradley, the effing OG Pinhead.
Hellraiser, yeah.
Why would you not want to be there? The Hell Priest himself. We're going to have, there's going to be a really cool Terrifier 2 reunion. Sans Lauren Lavera. I believe she's got a work commitment coming up. But Damien Leone, David Howard Thornton, Leah Voicey, Jenna Cannell, she's going to be there. And Jack Osborne, I don't know what he's doing there, but he's going to be there. Devin Sawa, Mr. Idle Hands and Final Destination himself. Listen, if there's anything else that like I would want to see, it would be John Kassir. And for Tales from the Crypt, he's the Crypt Keeper. And, he's in Demon Knight. And listen, dude is fantastic. And, okay, I left out a name with the Cobra Kai stuff. Martin Cove is going to be there, and I almost want to just go there and fight him just for being like one of the main antagonists from my childhood.
Oh yeah.
But then I would probably get swooned by Christy Swanson, the original Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. John, in a different world, we might be lovers, she and I. I don't know.
Parallel. Everything Everywhere All at Once universes.
Yeah, we'd be parallel, all right, buddy. All right, but this is a family show, so don't talk like that. We got Robin Lively. Speaking of Hammers of the Gods, okay, this is a film that I don't like to brag about liking, but it definitely gets watched anytime I catch it on, and it was Teen Witch. And Teen Witch was one of those films that I would hide from my friends, but I would enjoy very much so, because not because of Robin Lively, but because of her little homegirl with the hats on, the one that sang Top That, or I'm sorry, that rapped Top That.
Yeah.
And then we've got a handful of other people. Dee Wallace, like the America's Mother, if I may say so.
Right. Yeah.
There's a whole list. C. Thomas Howell from The Hitcher and a shitload of other things. But listen, this is a lineup.
Yeah.
And I almost wish I could just go to Cincinnati and check it out.
Yeah.
But after that, after the 24th, on the same weekend, you got a trip, man. How are you going to make it from Cincinnati to Jersey, Atlantic City?
I don't think I'm going to be able to go because it's like the same weekend. I think I'm really bummed because it's Tom McLaughlin's going to be there too, who is the director of Friday 13 Part 6. And I wrote to him a couple of times and we kind of talked a little bit because I wanted to get his movie because he made this movie called One Dark Night. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's his first movie he did. And the story behind that was really inspiring too, because it was one of those things where no one wanted to make it. No one was going to give him any funding. He finally found these, I think like Mormons or, who were going to give him some money for it. But he had to shoot it in 30 days. And so it was very much but that led to him making like the fan favorite Friday film, So I think that his story was really inspiring to me. And so I reached out to him. He teaches at Chapman University. And he just had he kind of shared a lot on his experiences, but then he had this really kind of incredible, like he sent me this really nice email right before I went to Popcorn Frights that was really, I don't know, it was kind of heartfelt, and it was really cool to see that, like you hope sometimes when you meet some of these people that they're going to be genuine and cool. And I felt like Tom McLaughlin was like the most genuine, nice kind of person you could, it's like, it just makes you think like we're all kind of a big family in a way. And that's like
what they say, don't meet your heroes, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, he would be the exception.
He was cool. Yeah. And I think it's like we go back to like film family a lot because, like I worked on Revealer and that was how I learned to do the COVID stuff for our film. But then like my friend Rob, who shot that film, like we worked on this movie that just premiered last night at South by Southwest called Brooklyn 45 that Ted Gagan did, who did, We Were Always There in that Mohawk movie. And then Christina Klebe was on that, who was in Rob Zombie's Halloween. And then I worked on a movie with John Paddock called Black Mold. And he's in that whole like Jill Gavarsian, like the stylist kind of family. And so it's just kind of cool to see that, we're all like going back to what we were talking about before with Academy Awards. See, we're going full circle here. Is that it's a small world, but
I wouldn't want to paint it.
Yeah, probably not. But I love that.
You triggered something. You said Christina Klebe. I just saw her in something. I can't remember what it was. That never happens.
Yeah.
Damn it.
I don't know.
Well, I'll think of it after we're finished.
She's really cool too. I like her a lot. She's awesome. Really cool.
Well, okay, so you're not going to make the trip to Atlantic City, which is fine because it's very far. But the film will be showing in Atlantic City. Yeah. Correct? All right. Yes. So all you humanoids want to get your tickets for that. If you're in the New Jersey, Atlantic City area, you can do that at NewJerseyHorrorCon.com. And they've got a lineup that rivals the one in Cincinnati. Yeah. So check out the website. I mean, you'll see who all's there. Eric Roberts, I think he's got a famous sister.
Eric Roberts, yeah.
Eric Roberts, best of the best. All right, I'm talking about Eric Grady. I'm like, Eric Grady. What was his character on Best of the Best? Damn it! What a movie that was.
Yeah. And then
we got Michael Pare from Eddie and the Cruisers. Felissa Rose. Come on, man. Who doesn't want to see Felissa Rose?
I know.
Tommy Moran, Nancy Loomis, Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes. I would love to meet him. Absolute gentleman. Linnea Quigley. Of course, you want to see Linnea Quigley. Caroline Williams, Stretch from Chainsaw Massacre 2. Man, this is a couple of really good lineups. You can't go wrong by picking one of these festivals to see the film Final Summer. Now, listen, let's talk about Final Summer for a minute.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, so you were kind enough to allow me to screen the film. Very grateful for it. What's ironic about the timing is that I watched Final Summer just hours after I revisited an old slasher that I'd always been kind of fond of, called Madman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So both films start with their characters around a campfire.
That's right.
Yeah, telling the scary story.
Yeah.
I've always loved that. I guess the method of establishment of the
Mhm.
rules of the universe that
Yeah.
you're pulling us into, that happens in front of the campfire or around the campfire.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the campfire story is a classic slasher staple. But without spoilers, what were you trying to establish in this cold open?
Kind of, it was just to, oh, well, one was to kind of build the, yeah, there was a lot of red herrings that were thrown into that opening kind of thing to get the audience. And there's a little bit of misdirection there too. But it's, and it kind of is visited again at the end. But I think, just one, I think my dad was a firefighter, paramedic growing up, and he originally wanted to be a forest ranger. And so I always grew up with the Smokey the Bear story, and I thought it'd be really funny if it was this campfire story that's also like a Smokey the Bear kind of story. So when he does the thing at the end, you're like, wait a second, like, and so it's a campfire story, but it almost has it's like a way for them as counselors to kind of tell kids to, like, fire safety is important kind of thing. And so I thought that would be funny within the context of a slasher movie where you're like, wait a second. So it almost works on a couple different levels. There's the level that the camp counselors are using it as, which is not necessarily the story of the killer. It's more the story of, like, don't leave fires unattended kind of thing.
Well, one thing I took from, like, I guess the film as a whole, you talked about this earlier, being in love with the cinematography from, another project. But you used what I call just like slasher angles, like the axe swing to a downed victim. That approach, I think you know what I'm talking about without spoiling anything. Then there's the, like the walk behind where you're accentuating the weapon. Like, there's no reason for the killer to hold the weapon that way, but you want the silhouette to show off the blade and the blunt side of the axe in order to really feel like what kind of damage that can do. And then you've got dragging the axe across the asphalt to hear that scraping sound. Like, these are things that, like, audibly and visually, you're maximizing what the audience, basically you're making them feel how that axe would feel in their chest before a swing is ever made. And I got to salute you for that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
So when you talk about the cinematography, that's what comes to mind for me with Final Summer. And I'm highly suggesting people see this film. I loved it. Like, are there flaws? Absolutely, there are flaws. Like, but that's the problem. We're watching it. Hey, we need to be watching this thing on a tube where there is no HD.
Right.
Just the way Blockbuster Video intended to happen.
Oh, totally.
So listen, I got to know something though. There's usually a story behind the chosen mask in any given masked slasher film. What's the story with this one? How'd you settle on it?
Yeah, I kept going back to it. I found, because I thought, like, what would be cool is a skull mask, because I go back to the 80s. The 80s masks to me are kind of the high point of slasher films, where you have a very cool, very simple and minimal look, which is Michael Myers or Jason. And the thing that I like about Michael Myers and Jason is that they're basically kind of white. So then in the dark, you have that, the iconic shot of the coming out of the shadows,
illumination. Yeah.
And I think, but it was tough to find a mask, because it's always like, to make one, it's like always like $5,000 or something, which I didn't have. Or then if you get a latex one, it doesn't fit right. And I felt like, well, early 90s, it was all about like lycra and spandex. I was thinking, like, well, if I could find a mask that's kind of simple and you could stash in a pocket, you could conceivably, as a killer, kind of hide amongst everybody as like a whodunit. And then I saw this $12 mask online, and I was like, there's something about it that just kept, it was weird looking, but very, like, simple. So I ordered it online, and then I got it, and I just put it on, and I did some screen tests in my house, and I was like, oh, dude, that's that's the mask. So so I reached out to the company, and they were fine with it. So they gave us the permission to use. And if the film takes off, I think we might do like a cross promotional kind of branded thing. But they're really nice to let us use the mask. I just, I sent them the poster, and they're like, "Oh, this is me." I'm like, "Duh."
That's great.
That's
fantastic. Well, a lot of the violence in this film is more about what you don't see rather than what you do see.
Yeah.
It kind of causes your imagination as a horror fan. Sometimes our imaginations can be worse than like anything you could even put on screen.
Yeah.
So how did you find that perfect balance? Because the screen door kill, that was definitely about the visual. I mean, definitely my favorite kill, obviously, because it is the more visual. But how do you balance out? Like, I don't want to show them everything, but I want to show them something, and I don't want to show them too much because then they become desensitized to it,
Right.
and the kills mean a lot less.
Yeah, I think it was like, so part of it is because there's so much to the movie that has to do with gaslighting and manipulation, and so everything that you're kind of seeing there's an element of gaslighting to it, but the killer, I think, so like as an audience, like the issue with gaslighting is when it happens to you, you're kind of isolated in a way. And so like someone is shaping your reality to see things the way that they want you to see them. So as an audience, I wanted to show a lot of the kills from a wider shot. So it's like you can't not deny what you're seeing. So there's one kill that happens like later on in the film that's kind of also like a big reveal. And when you see it, it's almost like the kill itself, while shocking, is not nearly as psychotic as what comes after that, when the person immediately like turns around, they're like gaslighting that person. And so I felt like that was the thing I wanted. So like when you see the kill in the wide, it's like, and I think there's something kind of more documentary like, or someone was saying documentary like the other day about seeing a kill happen wide versus close up, where it's more like the gore and the flash and kind of thing. So I think that was shocking, but also for the audience to see this, and then to see the real mental illness when that character goes to gaslight this other person. You're like, whoa. And so I talked to some of the actors and the crew about like stuff I went through. And I don't think they really kind of understood until we did some of those scenes where they're like, whoa, like this is kind of, I'm starting to see where you're coming from with some of these things. This, and so I think that's where I felt like, yeah, but then the intimacy of the screen door thing is interesting because that's thank you to Lazo and to Farboda for really choreographing this amazing fight sequence too, because they were so good in that sequence, and it's kind of like it's I think with a lot of slasher films, you don't necessarily see someone fighting for their life, and so I wanted her to be like, or them to be like struggling and fighting back as to the very end, and even like almost in a selfless way where they're protecting their friends, So anyway, I could talk about this for a long time, but yeah.
No, I mean, that was a perfect answer though. Listen, Final Summer was nominated for a few awards to be presented at HorrorHound in Cincinnati. Best production design, sounds self-explanatory. Best special effects. This was probably a kudos award for Heather Harlow, is it not?
Yeah. And she's awesome too. She's great. She's a trooper. She is like endless supply of positivity and support and encouragement, which I appreciate. So yeah.
Well, that's a special effect for us all, isn't it?
Yeah,
John?
Absolutely.
You got the judge's choice because viewers' choice isn't good enough. Since the panel would like us to know, the schmucks like us can't tell you what makes a good film. So we got to have the judge's choice.
Yeah.
And best feature. So what's the difference between the two? Judge's choice and best feature. Aren't they just telling us what the best feature is?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think maybe I have no idea. Maybe sometimes there's a sentimental favorite. I don't know.
Well, you're going to sweep them all, John.
Well,
you heard it from me. You're going to sweep them all.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I think it's like when we went to Atlanta, it was just great to meet all those other filmmakers, and just be there with them. And I think that's the best part of it, It's like awards are cool. Like I had to go through like the airport with our. I'll show you this real quick, if you don't mind.
Do it. I'm just saying that you guys are gonna everything everywhere all at once.
Oh, yeah,
the
right.
HorrorHound festival.
So this was fun. I had to walk through like the Atlanta airport with that.
raises no questions.
Which actually, when I think about it, Atlanta is like the home of The Walking Dead. So I'm sure they're like, oh yeah, no big deal. So
It's just another guy with a head in his arms.
I had it in my backpack and I had to put my backpack through like the X-ray thing, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, so at least they didn't try to Joe Pesci you with like 8
Yeah.
heads in a duffel bag, right?
Oh yeah.
That's always a good. John, listen, man. Before we slide the gag reels, tell everybody where they can find you on your socials.
Oh yeah. So on Facebook, it's Final Summer Movie. Same with TikTok, we're Final Summer Movie, and then Instagram, I think we're also Final Summer Movie, and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then I think we've got a YouTube page too, Final Summer Movie or something. But yeah.
All those links are going to be in the episode description. We're going to get them in there, and that way you don't have to rely on memory, like my good friend John Isberg over here. We're getting old, John. We can't remember it all. We got to write it down on like a pencil and paper.
This is true.
And if the pencil and paper is too far away from me, I got to convince myself that what I wanted to write down wasn't really that important. Right. That's a Mitch Hedberg joke. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take the credit for that. But guys, remember to check out our shows within the Slasher Sports family. Slasher U with Christian Rao and Steve Feck, keeping you up to date with college sports. Suki's Honeydew Project with Suki Suburbia, where she's taking you by the hand, getting you out of the house and into some activities that you might not have wanted to try on your own. And of course, the baseball podcast called the OK Baseball Podcast, OBP, like on base percentage. Yeah, we thought of that. And that's also with Christian Rao and Sean Doyle, covering the latest and greatest in Major League Baseball. And if you're patient, I'll be joining that party with my daily fantasy sports picks once baseball season is in full swing. Like what I did there, full swing, because it's baseball, they swing a bat. Listen, now, I'm Billy Graves for John Isberg. I want to thank you all for showing up to this terrible podcast, but I've got great guests bringing you great indie film. I want you to go out and support horror films. I want you to support indie filmmakers and indie film in general. Now go forth and may you drink the blood of your enemies from the skulls of their children.
Cool. Thank you.